Gardening in the 18th Century by George Henslow. This is recorded to celebrate the 8th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. From the Gardener's Chronicle, Saturday, January the 16th, 1897. In Mr. Burbage's paper on reference books on English gardening literature, Journal Royal Horticultural Society, page 101, he mentions the name of John Lawrence and refers to his book, The Clergyman's Recreation, AD 1714, but has omitted a much more important work entitled A New System of Agriculture, being a complete body of husbandry and gardening in all the parts of them. It is a folio of 456 pages in 5 books, containing all the best and latest as well as many new improvements useful to the husbandman, etc., wherein are interspersed many curious observations on vegetation, on the diseases of trees, and the general annoyances to vegetables and their probable cures, by John Lawrence, M.A., Rector of Bishop's Wearmouth and Prebendary of the Church of Sarum, London, 1726. It commences with a dedication to Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales, the frontispiece being an illustration of "a perspective view of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales' house at Richmond," the most severely plain and formal demesne it is possible to conceive. 280 pages are devoted to agriculture, in which it may be noted that he includes the cultivation of the silkworm, of which the author writes, "It is but of late years that the silkworm has been introduced amongst us here in England, and as yet they are not encouraged," etc. The second book deals with timber trees, evergreens, and hardy shrubs. Book 3 treats of fruit trees and of the most desirable situations, soils, and the best methods of planting, pruning, etc., a chapter being devoted to the cultivation of the vine. Of small fruits, the filbud (filbert) is an improved kind of hazel, and bears a fruit much admired by most, especially as an amusement over a glass of wine after a good dinner." There were 3 principal kinds of strawberries cultivated: the Virginian or scarlet, the Hautboy, and the common wild one. Of these he discusses the true and bastard or male kinds, and gives figures of them. "If helped with a shower of pigeon dung in the spring, the strawberry will produce a wonderful crop and very large fruit." A fruit tree, "little known amongst us till of late years," was the azarole, Crataegus azarola, or Neapolitan medlar. "It is now to be had of most nurserymen about London." Diseases of fruit trees are then discussed, and the author thinks that some are analogous to those of man, and names them measles, dead palsy, gangrene (canker), consumption, yellow jaundice, etc., and notes that diseases, by checking growth, tend to cause much fruit, just as he had previously observed, in training fruit trees, that boughs bent horizontally are more fruitful. Book 4 deals with the kitchen garden, and therein are discussed all the vegetables then grown. The author has many pertinent remarks. Thus, in collecting cauliflower seed, "it should be saved from such flowers as are large and white, the seed of 2-year-old being the best. When you head a cabbage, cut it slopewise, that the rain may not so easily penetrate the stalk." Kidney beans, he says, is an ancient food, yet it is not a century since it was accounted an extraordinary rarity in England. There are above 50 sorts, but the 2 most remarkable are the dwarf, and a white kind which will grow 6 feet high." Of salads, besides all we use now, purslane was "much admired by some, and was generally entertained in all salads mingled with hotter herbs." There were two kinds, the green and the golden. Several kinds of sorrel, chervil, bugloss, corn salad, mallow, elderflowers, burnet, sampier (samphire), and scurvy grass were all grown as salads. In speaking of cresses, he says, "But the Indian cress, Nasturtium indicum, is what is now most coveted in salads." Coming to the flower garden, the author gives "a complete catalogue of flowers usually known in England." This embraces 99 species. Of lilies there were only 4 kinds, and the author mentions how some curious persons colour the white lily by making them absorb through their roots the lees of claret. The tuberose he speaks of as "now become very common." The belvedere "is one of the taller sort of perennials," Chenopodium scoparium, now called the belvedere cypress. Carnations of many kinds were evidently great favourites. Our Lady's slipper was cultivated, of which he writes, "The flowers are sometimes of a pale yellow, and sometimes brown, tending to purple. There is also a smaller sort with a white flower, and another with purple. Pretty as they are, many of these are found in divers places in Yorkshire and Lancashire, growing wild." The scarlet runner bean was also grown as a garden flower, "whose pods are singularly good used in pickles. However, it is now adopted for a flower. It is usually employed to adorn walls and arbours." There are many more interesting features in the book, but enough has been said for a short notice. End of Gardening in the 18th Century, by George Henslow.